President Trump will hold a Keep America Great rally in South Florida tonight before heading to his Mar-a-Lago club for Thanksgiving. Tonight's rally is the first of 3 South Florida events for the president in the next 2 weeks. On December 7th, he will speak at an Israeli-American conference in Hollywood, followed by a Republican fundraiser in Miami. Mr. Trump narrowly beat Hillary Clinton in Florida during the 2016 election, but he did not perform well in Broward County, the bluest part of Florida and location for tonight's rally. Joining me from Miami is Jim Defede. He is an investigative reporter for our station there, WFOR. All right, Jim, we know that Florida will be critically important in 2020, but why is the president holding this rally now?
Well, this is really sort of being billed as almost a homecoming. As you may know, the president recently changed his voter registration from New York to Florida. So now he's officially a Florida resident, a Florida man, as it were. And so this is the Republicans in Florida sort of throwing him a welcome home party to his new address. But as you said, Florida is a critical state. You know, everyone involved in the Trump campaign who I've spoken to has said that if they do not win Florida, they do not see a path to winning the presidency again in 2020.
Well, you recently spoke with Florida Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz about the impeachment inquiry. How does she see the current state of the impeachment inquiry? And do most Democrats there in Florida share her views?
I do think that the Democratic Party is pretty much galvanized here in Florida in favor of impeachment. Whether or not they think that it will actually come to pass in the Senate that he would be removed, I think is a completely different story. In my conversations with Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, as you said, she's firmly in the impeachment camp. She believes that what the president has done is not just grounds for impeachment, but is also grounds for removal from office. She sees this as an issue of right and wrong. She claims, at least, that whether it was a Democrat or a Republican, she would feel this way. I'm sure there are those who would say that that's easy for her to say as long as it's a Republican in office. But you know, a lot of the conversation that I've had with her has been more focused on her trying to understand where the Republicans are coming from in terms of denying some of the evidence that's been presented before them. The Democrats feel that they've made a strong case, but they don't necessarily see any movement among Republicans, and that seems to puzzle them a bit.
Well, Jim, we know that the president recently brought on former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi to help with impeachment messaging. Why did the president pick her specifically?
President Trump has always liked Pam Bondi. He's always felt a sort of affinity for her. He's seen her on her various appearances on Fox News. She sort of fits the mold that he likes in terms of a spokesperson. You know, there was a lot of talk when President Trump was first elected that Pam Bondi would be joining his administration. There was talk about her becoming the new drug czar, a number of other positions. They never quite settled on a position that she would want, that would have direct access to the president, and so she never joined the administration. But the president finally acceding to the idea that he needed a war room, he needed to beef up his staff, particularly after Rudy Giuliani became enmeshed in his own version of this scandal and was no longer an effective conduit on television to speak. The president, not wanting to have to carry the entire load on television, although if you've seen some of his appearances lately, he seems to enjoy it, wanted to bring on some people who could also play that role and speak for him. I see Pam Bondi as that sort of surrogate. I don't know that she's actually sort of developing attorney-type strategy, but she can certainly help on the messaging.
Well, meantime, the president is not the only billionaire candidate focusing on Florida. I know you've been digging into this. How is former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg planning to campaign in the Sunshine State?
Well, it's interesting because you've seen his commercials now starting to appear nationwide on cable news outlets and the networks. But one of the things I was curious about was whether some of that money was actually filtering down into local media markets. And so I started looking at some FCC records here in the state of Florida, and sure enough, Mike Bloomberg has spent about $1.2 million. He's going to be spending it over the next 2 weeks here in the Miami market in South Florida. He's also spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in the Orlando, Tampa, I-4 corridor. So you're seeing, I think, a strategy develop where Mike Bloomberg knows that he's going to not really compete as strong in some of those early states, and he's taking the long view. So if he's already doing air bombardment on the Super Tuesday states, all those different states that are going to be voting on March 3rd, he's even looking past Super Tuesday to the Florida primary, which isn't even until March 17th. He's the only presidential candidate actually running advertisements in the state of Florida right now. Everyone else is spending their money in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. Bloomberg is looking past that and spending it here in Florida as well as across the country. And that sort of suggests that he's going to try to stay in the long range, hoping to sort of challenge and see if Vice President Biden is able to sort of galvanize support, and if not, step in if he needs to. And he's going to be completely self-financed, so he can do it. He can write the check.
It'll be fascinating to see if that strategy, in fact, works. March 17th is just around the corner. Jim Defede.